4 miles beneath the Pacific, in a realm of crushing pressure and eternal darkness, lies a 79-year-old crime scene frozen in time. This is the USS Samuel B. Roberts, the ship that did the impossible. In 1944, this tin can escort ship charged headlong into the teeth of the most powerful battleship force Japan had ever assembled. It was a suicide mission that naval historians still struggle to explain. But for nearly 8 decades, the final chapter of that battle remained a mystery, buried at a depth so extreme it was considered unreachable by human hands. That changed in 2022. At 22,621 feet deeper than any shipwreck ever discovered, explorers finally found the Sammy B. What they saw through the lens of a titanium submersible didn't just reveal a wreck. It revealed the physical evidence of a crew that literally broke the laws of physics and their own machinery to stand their ground. Today we're diving into the abyss to uncover how this David versus Goliath story truly ended. We're looking at the forensic evidence of a battle that refused to stay buried, and the technology that allowed us to finally bring these ghosts of the Pacific back into the light. To understand the gravity of this discovery, you first have to understand the place where the Sammy B came to rest. It is a region of our planet known as the Hadal zone, named after Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. At over 22,000 feet down, you aren't just at the bottom of the ocean. You are in a part of the Pacific that is fundamentally an alien world. The sunlight dies out less than 1,000 feet from the surface. Down here, the temperature hovers just above freezing and the silence is absolute. But it's the pressure that truly defies the imagination. At the depth where the Samuel B. Roberts lies, the water is pressing in at over 10,000 pounds per square inch. That is the equivalent of having an elephant stand on your thumb, multiplied across every square inch of your body. If you took a standard styrofoam cup down to this depth, the air would be squeezed out of it so violently that it would return to the surface the size of a thimble, its molecular structure permanently crushed. For 78 years, this pressure acted as a physical barrier, a liquid fortress guarding the secrets of the Sammy B. It was a place where no human had any business being, and for decades, we simply lacked the tools to even try. Think about this: as a species, we have mapped the surface of Mars and the Moon with more precision than we have our own ocean floor. We know more about the craters on a dead rock millions of miles away than we do about the canyons 4 miles beneath our own keel. Exploring this depth isn't just difficult. It is a feat of engineering that mirrors the complexity of a moon landing. The breakthrough came in June 2022, led by retired Navy officer Victor Vescovo and his team. To pierce the abyss, they used a piece of machinery that sounds like it was ripped from the pages of a science fiction novel, a deep submergence vehicle called the limiting factor. This isn't your grandfather's submarine. It is built around a dedicated 90mm thick titanium pressure hull. Titanium is the only material that can withstand the cyclic fatigue of repeatedly diving into the Hadal depths without folding like a soda can. It is a spherical fortress designed to keep humans alive in an environment that is trying to kill them from every conceivable angle. But the hull is only half the battle. To find a 300-foot ship in a pitch-black wilderness that spans thousands of square miles, you need eyes that can see in the dark. The limiting factor was equipped with a suite of sensors that didn't even exist 5 years ago. We are talking about side-scan sonar systems with the resolution to pick out individual deck guns from hundreds of feet away. and ultra-high-definition cameras capable of operating under pressure that would shatter the engine block of a truck. When Vescovo and his pilot began their descent, they weren't just traveling down. They were traveling back in time. As the light faded from blue to a bruised purple, and finally into a total ink-black void, they left the world of the living behind. They were hunting for ghosts in a place where the laws of physics are the only authority. The technology they carried was the only thing standing between them and the crushing weight of the Pacific. And what they were about to find would prove that while the ocean can bury a ship, it can never truly erase the story of the men who fought on her. But to understand why Vescovo and his team were hunting these ghosts in the first place, you have to travel back to the surface to the morning of October 25th, 1944. You have to imagine the sunrise over the Philippine Sea, where a small group of American ships known as Taffy III was about to stumble into the most lopsided naval engagement in human history. This wasn't a battle between equals. It was a mathematical suicide mission. Taffy III was never meant for the front lines. They were the small boys, a handful of escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 tiny destroyer escorts, like the Samuel B. Roberts. These were thin-skinned support vessels designed to hunt lone submarines or protect slow-moving convoys. In the hierarchy of naval warfare, they were the bottom of the food chain. But as the morning mist cleared, the horizon began to fill with the jagged, terrifying silhouettes of the Japanese center force. Leading that charge was the Yamato, the largest and most powerful battleship ever built. To give you a sense of the scale, the Yamato alone displaced over 70,000 tons. The Sammy B, barely 1,300 tons. A single 18-inch shell from the Yamato's main guns weighed 3,200 pounds, more than the combined weight of the Sammy B's entire torpedo load. The Japanese force included 4 battleships and 6 heavy cruisers, a wall of floating steel designed to obliterate the pride of the American fleet. Instead, all they found were the small boys of Taffy III. When the Japanese Leviathans opened fire, the sea around the American ships began to erupt in towering geysers of dyed water. The Japanese used colored shells to track their aim. For Commander Robert Copeland, the captain of the Samuel B. Roberts, the situation wasn't just dire. It was a death sentence. He looked at his 215-man crew, most of them barely out of high school, and he didn't order a retreat. He couldn't. If Taffy III broke and ran, the thousands of American troops currently landing on the beaches of Leyte would be slaughtered from the sea. Copeland keyed the ship's intercom. His voice was steady, but his words were chilling. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can. What happened next broke every established rule of naval doctrine. Instead of keeping their distance, the Sammy B and her sister ships turned toward the Japanese fleet. They didn't just defend, they charged. In what naval experts still call the charge of the tin cans, these tiny ships sprinted into a storm of heavy-caliber hellfire. The Sammy B, a ship with the armor of a refrigerator, drove straight into the heart of the Japanese line, closing to within 2 nautical miles of the heavy cruiser Chokai. At that range, the Americans were so close that the Japanese battleships couldn't even depress their massive guns low enough to hit them. It was a knife fight in a phone booth. The Sammy B began trading punches with heavy cruisers 10 times its size, firing its 5-inch guns so fast that the barrels began to glow. They were fighting with a desperate, frantic aggression that confused the Japanese commanders. The sheer audacity of the attack led Admiral Kurita to believe he had accidentally stumbled into a much larger American task force. The Samuel B. Roberts was a ship that refused to acknowledge its own insignificance. For over an hour, it danced through a rain of steel, punching far above its weight class and buying precious minutes for the rest of the task force. But as we would later find out from the wreckage in the abyss, this defiance came at a terrible price. The Sammy B wasn't just outgunned, it was being pushed into a state of mechanical collapse that would eventually send it on a 4-mile journey to the ocean floor, while the world on deck was a storm of colored shell splashes and jagged steel. The world below the waterline was a deafening oil-soaked pressure cooker. To understand why the Sammy B was able to perform like a titan that morning, you have to look into the heart of the ship, the engineering spaces. This is where the story shifts from tactical bravery to a raw mechanical desperation that would eventually be confirmed by the forensic evidence found in the abyss. In the 1940s, destroyer escorts were built with a philosophy of efficiency and endurance, not high-speed combat. They were equipped with safety systems designed to prevent the boilers from exploding, the engines from overheating, and the generators from melting down. Under normal circumstances, the Samuel B. Roberts was rated for a top speed of 24 knots. Anything more was considered a danger to the structural integrity of the propulsion system. But on the morning of October 25th, normal circumstances had been left miles behind in the wake. Down in the engine room, Lieutenant Lucky Trowbridge, the ship's chief engineer, made a choice that would have earned him a court-martial in peacetime. He ordered his men to bypass every safety governor on the boilers. They literally tied down the relief valves and bypassed the cutouts, allowing the steam pressure to climb into the red zone and stay there. They were running the ship's power plant so far beyond its design specifications that the entire hull began to vibrate with a violent rhythmic shudder. The result was a mechanical miracle. The Sammy B, a ship designed to chug along at 24 knots, suddenly surged to over 28.5 knots. That extra 4 knots might not sound like much on land, but in a naval gun duel, it was everything. It was the difference between being a sitting duck and being a ghost that the Japanese gunners couldn't quite lead. Trowbridge knew that every minute they spent at that speed was shaving years off the ship's life. He was intentionally breaking the machine to keep the men above him alive. The same spirit of breaking the rules was happening on the gun deck. Gunner's Mate 3rd Class Paul Carr was in charge of the aft 5-inch gun. These guns were supposed to be fired at a controlled rate to allow the barrels to cool and the loading mechanisms to reset. Carr ignored the manuals. He and his crew were firing shells every few seconds, nearly 10 rounds per minute, which was double the rated capacity. The barrel of the gun grew so hot that the paint began to blister and peel away, and the air inside the turret became a toxic fog of cordite and sweat. But there is a dark side to this kind of desperation, one that the 2022 discovery finally helped us understand. When you bypass the safety systems of a warship, you are turning the vessel into a ticking time bomb. The forensic analysis of the wreck reveals that when the Japanese shells finally found their mark, the damage wasn't just localized. Because the boilers were overpressurized and the systems were running at a catastrophic maximum, a single hit to the engine room triggered a cascading failure. At 8:51 a.m., a Japanese heavy cruiser shell finally punched through the thin skin of the Sammy B and detonated in the forward engine room. In an instant, the high-pressure steam that had been giving them their impossible speed turned into a lethal force within the ship. The boilers didn't just fail. They erupted. The wreck shows a level of internal structural trauma that confirms the ship was essentially tearing itself apart from the inside out long before it hit the bottom. The Sammy B didn't just sink because it was outgunned. It sank because its crew had pushed its very soul beyond the breaking point. They had traded the ship's life for time that the rest of Taffy 3 used to escape. And as the ship finally lost power and began to settle in the water, the men in the engine room and the gun turrets remained at their posts, trapped by the very machines they had pushed to greatness. When the Samuel B. Roberts finally slipped beneath the waves at 9 a.m., she left behind 120 survivors bobbing in the vast, oil-slicked expanse of the Pacific. For those men, the story ended when the mast disappeared. But for the ship itself, a new silent chapter was just beginning, a 4-mile plunge into the total darkness of the abyss. For 78 years, historians could only guess what happened during that long descent. It wasn't until Victor Vescovo's lights cut through the ink-black water in 2022 that the Sammy B could finally testify for herself. What the team discovered was a scene that defied all oceanographic expectations. Usually when a ship sinks to such extreme depths, the journey is violent. Internal air pockets explode, the hull crumples under the increasing pressure, and the vessel often disintegrates into a massive debris field scattered across miles of sea floor. Think of the Titanic, whose bow and stern lie nearly 2,000 feet apart, mangled beyond recognition. But the Samuel B. Roberts was different. The wreck lies on a gentle slope, broken into 2 main sections, but they are separated by only 15 feet. In the world of deep-sea shipwrecks, they are practically touching. This proximity tells a profound story about the ship's final moments. It suggests that the Sammy B didn't roll over or tumble as she sank. She descended in a relatively stable, upright position, holding her structural integrity almost all the way to the bottom. The forensic evidence indicates she hit the seafloor bull first, a final act of defiance from a ship that refused to break apart even after the engines had died. As the cameras of the limiting factor panned across the hull, the preservation was nothing short of haunting. Because of the extreme depth and the lack of oxygen and wood-boring organisms, the steel looked as if it had settled there only yesterday. The team could clearly see the individual 5-inch gun mounts the very guns Paul Carr had fired, until they literally blew up. They could see the torpedo tubes empty now, reminding us of the desperate knife fight range at which this battle was fought. Most poignantly, they found the ship's mast knocked down during the engagement, lying across the deck like a fallen soldier. But the most striking part of this forensic abyss was the battle damage. The wreck serves as a physical map of the battle off Samar. You can see the jagged circular punctures where Japanese shells, some likely from the heavy cruiser Chokai, punched through the thin, unarmored hull. You can trace the path of the flooding that finally overcame the pumps. By comparing these high-definition images with the after-action reports written by Commander Copeland in 1944, historians have been able to confirm the exact sequence of the ship's demise. Every dent and tear in the metal matches a moment of agony described by the survivors nearly 8 decades ago. This isn't just a pile of rusted steel. It is a 3-dimensional record of the most lopsided naval fight in history. The discovery of the Sammy B turned a legend into a tangible reality. It proved that the accounts of the survivors weren't exaggerated by time or trauma. The damage was all there etched in the steel. The ship remains a frozen crime scene, sitting at a depth that should have made it invisible forever. The fact that we can see it at all is a testament to how far our technology has come. But the fact that it is so well preserved is a testament to the strength of the ship itself. It fought to the end on the surface, and it held itself together through 4 miles of falling darkness to ensure its story would one day be told correctly. The discovery of the Samuel B. Roberts at 22,621 feet is more than just a milestone for deep-sea exploration. It is the closing of a circle that has remained open for nearly 80 years. There is a haunting poetic timing to this story that feels almost scripted. The last living survivor of the Sammy B, a man named Adred Lenoir, passed away on March 20th, 2022. He was the final witness, the last man who could look you in the eye and tell you what the smoke and the fire felt like on that October morning. Just 3 months after he was laid to rest, the ship he had spent a lifetime remembering finally emerged from the darkness. It was as if the ship had been waiting for the last of its crew to join the ranks of the fallen before it allowed itself to be found. Today, the Samuel B. Roberts is officially protected under the Sunken Military Craft Act. It is not a tourist attraction, and it is not a treasure site. It is a war grave. The 89 men who went down with their ship are still there, resting in a cathedral of titanium-crushing pressure and absolute silence. For 78 years, their families had to be content with a name on a memorial wall and a blue expanse of ocean that refused to give up its secrets. Now they have a place. They have images of the very guns their grandfathers manned and the decks they walked. The abyss has finally given back the small boy that stood its ground against giants. What the Sammy B teaches us is that courage isn't about the size of the ship or the thickness of the armor plating. It's about what happens in that moment when you realize the odds are impossible. The math says you're dead, and you choose to charge anyway. The wreck, sitting at the bottom of the Philippine Sea, is a physical monument to that choice. It is a reminder that even when a machine is pushed beyond its limits and shattered into pieces, the spirit of the people who operated it remains intact, etched into the very grain of the steel. We are living in a unique window of history. For the first time, technology is allowing us to reach back through miles of water and decades of time to touch the stories that shaped our world. But these missions are expensive, difficult, and rare. There are still hundreds of ships like the Samuel B. Roberts and thousands of stories like those of Paul Carr and Lucky Trowbridge still waiting in the dark for their turn to be told. If you believe that the courage of these men and the incredible technology used to find them deserve to be remembered, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. We are dedicated to uncovering these lost chapters of history and bringing the ghosts of the deep back into the light. By joining our community, you're helping us ensure that these stories of sacrifice aren't buried forever under the weight of the sea. The USS Samuel B. Roberts earned a single battle star for its service in World War II, but its true legacy is far greater. It is the ship that proved a tin can could possess the heart of a lion. And as long as we keep looking into the deep, as long as we keep asking what happened in those final moments, their watch will never truly end. Thank you for diving into the abyss with us today. We'll see you in the next chapter of history.